My dad sold our family cabin without letting me know, and now he wants me to buy it back from him. I, a 29-year-old man, have cherished memories of a rustic cabin owned by my mother's family for generations. Nestled by a serene lake and encircled by dense woods, this cabin was our family's retreat, where my mother would take us camping. It was quaint and slightly worn, its charm embodied by squeaky wooden floors, a traditional wood-burning stove, and walls adorned with photographs from countless family adventures. My mother adored this cabin, and it became a sanctuary where I felt her presence the strongest after she passed away when I was 17. My father had always spoken of the cabin as a family heirloom, a legacy to be passed down through generations. I naturally believed that eventually it would come to me or one of my siblings. However, everything began to change subtly yet unsettlingly after my father remarried. His new wife moved in, and initially she was quite pleasant, but over time, it seemed she intended to obliterate every trace of my mother's memory. The cherished family photos vanished from the walls, replaced by stark, modern decor that stripped the cabin of its warmth and nostalgia. I remained silent about these changes, reasoning that it was my father's life and his choice. But the transformation of the cabin felt like a betrayal, erasing the tangible memories of my mother. Recently, I noticed signs that my father might be facing financial troubles. Hints of poor investments came up in conversation, though he dismissed them whenever I probed further. My suspicion grew, and attempts to discuss the cabin or suggest visits became conversations my father evaded. Finally, seizing an opportunity to speak with him alone while my stepmother was away, I confronted him. That's when he revealed the shocking news. He had sold the cabin last month without prior discussion. I was left speechless, struggling to grasp the loss of this last connection to my mother, and he didn't even tell me until it was all done. The news hit me like a physical blow, and all I could muster was a pained, "Why?" My dad nonchalantly explained his pressing need for money, treating the sale as a routine transaction. But this was no mere property. It was a piece of our family's soul, a fragment of our shared history, carelessly discarded without even a discussion. When I pressed him about the buyer, his answers were frustratingly vague. "Just a private buyer," he said, telling me not to worry. The ambiguity only deepened my anguish. Who were these new owners? What would become of our cherished cabin? My frustration boiled over, and I confronted him with unreserved candor. I accused him of selfishness, of disregarding our family by not involving me, of betraying my trust by acting clandestinely. His retort was cutting. "If you want it so badly, why don't you buy it back?" It felt like a slap in the face. Here was my father, who had sold our family legacy without so much as consulting me, now suggesting I repurchase it, as if it were some sort of challenge, a test of my attachment to the cabin. I was too shocked to respond effectively, and he pressed his point without mercy. My stepmother joined in, implying that I should step up if the cabin truly mattered. The irony was bitter. They both knew well that I wasn't financially positioned to buy back anything, let alone at a time when I was barely scraping by. The thought of scrambling to gather funds for a cabin that by all rights should have remained in our family was ludicrous. Later that evening, still reeling from the conversation, I turned to Reddit for some semblance of solace. I laid out my story, sharing my feelings of betrayal and the absurd proposition made by my father. The community response was immediate and visceral. Many shared my shock and outrage, some suggesting I start a GoFundMe or consider a loan to reclaim the cabin, while others counseled me to accept the loss and move forward. Moving on from a place so deeply intertwined with my childhood and memories of my mom isn't simple. The responses on Reddit reflected a spectrum of opinions. Some sympathized, arguing that my dad had overstepped by selling what was more than just property. It was a piece of our family's heritage. Others contended that it was his right to sell his property as he saw fit. The discussions were mixed, but largely people understood my pain. The community shared their own tales of family disputes and irreplaceable losses, which made me realize I couldn't just resign myself to this outcome. The thought of someone else tearing down or modernizing my mom's beloved retreat for profit was unbearable. Now, I find myself caught in a painful standoff, unsure of how to reclaim what was once ours. I've been trying to track down the buyer, wondering if there's any possibility of reacquisition, but conversations with my dad lead nowhere. He dismisses my concerns, suggesting I'm the one making things difficult. Meanwhile, my stepmom insinuates that this ordeal should be a lesson for me, a challenge to demonstrate my resolve. It feels like they might be using this situation to test me or perhaps push me away. Despite the challenges, I refuse to give up easily. I'll continue to update as I strategize my next move. In my quest for answers, I visited the county records office to investigate the sale details. I discovered the cabin was sold quickly in a cash transaction to a private buyer, making the sale nearly untraceable. This secretive manner of dealing was shocking. My dad had never indicated the cabin was on the market. Learning it was a rushed cash-only sale added to my suspicions that this was deliberately kept from me. I reached out within our family network, hoping someone might shed light on the situation, but I hit wall after wall. Either people dodged the topic or knew nothing that could help. The discomfort was palpable. It seemed as if there was a collective reluctance to involve themselves. However, when I spoke to a few of my mother's relatives, their reactions mirrored my shock. They were dismayed that my father had sold the cabin without offering any of us a chance to purchase it first. One cousin revealed that my stepmother had expressed a desire to start anew, suggesting the cabin was a burden to my father, which seemed to confirm my suspicions of her influence over his decision. As the news filtered through the family, reactions were mixed. My father's relatives mostly withheld their opinions, though their lack of empathy was evident. Some subtly justified his actions, hinting that he had made a necessary decision. This familial rift only deepened my sense of isolation. In my determination, I found out that the buyer was open to selling the cabin back to me, but at a steep markup, capitalizing on my emotional attachment to the property. I was torn, desperate to reclaim a piece of my mother's legacy, but aware of the manipulation from both the buyer and within my own family. Confrontations with my father felt increasingly like ambushes. He challenged me to reclaim the cabin if it truly mattered to me, with my stepmother echoing this sentiment, suggesting that true family loyalty involves sacrifices. This issue even took center stage at a family dinner, where their remarks felt like a public shaming. I left that dinner early, more resolved than ever to regain ownership of the cabin. In pursuit of funds, I began assessing my assets, listing anything of value I could part with online, determined to gather the necessary resources. Several of my friends noticed my distress and reached out to understand what was troubling me. Upon hearing about the cabin, they didn't hesitate to offer their assistance. A few even purchased items I had listed for sale as a means to bolster my fundraising efforts. Their kindness injected a dose of optimism into my situation, though the financial gap to the cabin's asking price remained daunting. Dealing with my father had turned into a constant struggle. Each conversation was peppered with his reminders of the sacrifices he and my stepmother had made over the years, suggesting it was now my turn to demonstrate my commitment. It seemed as though they were engaging in a perverse form of emotional gameplay, and I oscillated between feeling tested and being urged to surrender. The mounting pressure was unsustainable, prompting me to explore loan options. The prospect of diving into debt was intimidating, particularly given my shaky financial footing. However, the thought of losing the cabin, the last bastion of my connection to my mother, was far more daunting. I turned to the Reddit community once again, sharing my predicament. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Users offered not only advice but also shared their personal encounters with familial discord and the tough choices between emotional ties and fiscal prudence. This support galvanized my resolve in ways I hadn't anticipated. My father's tactics intensified when he unexpectedly informed me that he had found another prospective buyer for the cabin. He pressed for a swift decision from me, refusing to disclose details about the buyer, only hinting at their eagerness to proceed. This reeked of another manipulative ploy, perhaps to hasten my decision-making under duress. Caught in this high-pressure scenario, I updated my Reddit supporters, seeking their insights on how to handle such high-stakes negotiations. Some advised me to challenge my father's claims, suspecting a bluff, while others cautioned about the risk of losing the cabin entirely. This mixture of opinions left me weighing my next steps carefully in a bid to not lose my childhood sanctuary. The mounting pressure was nearly unbearable, and with each passing day, I felt the cabin slipping further from my grasp. Restless nights were filled with strategizing and reevaluating my options. The idea of securing a loan loomed large, risky as it was, but the sense of solidarity from friends and my mother's side of the family spurred me on. It had become a collective endeavor. Every exchange with my father seemed to erect more barriers between us. He and my stepmother expressed in no uncertain terms that they were ready to sell the cabin to another buyer if I didn't act swiftly. The urgency was palpable. I needed to make a decision quickly, secure the funds to buy it back, or resign myself to losing it forever. I promised to share updates as soon as I had a clearer picture, but the feeling of being cornered intensified. Reacting to my previous post, I mobilized and reached out to every relative connected to the cabin or who cherished my mom's memory. While many of my mother's relatives showed empathy and were willing to contribute financially, my father's side was less supportive, with some advising me to respect his decision and suggesting that my efforts might be in vain. The situation escalated when my stepmother learned about my fundraising initiatives. She accused me of selfishness and of exacerbating the family tension. During a particularly tense family dinner, she vehemently argued that I was living in the past and insisted that the cabin was a burden my father needed to shed. My father's silence throughout her tirade only deepened the sting of her words. Despite the familial opposition, my friend stood by me, proposing we host a community fundraiser. The idea materialized into a local BBQ event, which, to my surprise, drew a larger crowd than anticipated. Residents from our town, some of whom I hadn't seen in years, came out in support. The event not only raised funds, but also bolstered my spirit significantly as I saw the tangible evidence of community support. However, amidst the encouragement, a few close friends expressed their reservations, questioning the feasibility of my plan and the emotional toll it was taking. My friends supported me, yet they worried that my deep emotional connection to the cabin could be clouding my judgment, potentially escalating tensions with my father. They feared for my well-being, hinting that perhaps it might be healthier to step back. Although their concerns were difficult to accept, abandoning my efforts after investing so much emotionally wasn't an option for me. During this period, I stumbled upon discrepancies in my dad's explanation of the cabin's sale. Initially, he claimed financial necessity as his reason for selling, but later, he casually mentioned an irresistibly high offer from the buyer. These conflicting statements prompted me to investigate further. A cousin on my mother's side revealed that my dad was grappling with undisclosed debts, suggesting his motivations weren't as straightforward as I was led to believe. This revelation prompted some Reddit users to advise seeking legal counsel. While I couldn't afford a protracted legal fight, the consultation with a lawyer provided valuable negotiation strategies. When I approached the buyer to discuss a possible price reduction, they were somewhat flexible but insisted on a rapid decision. Feeling the pressure of their urgency, I agreed to try and secure the funds by their stipulated deadline. Meanwhile, my mother's relatives rallied to support the cause, organizing a fundraising event to both gather funds and honor her memory. Their initiative deeply moved me, but it seemed to exacerbate tensions with my stepmother, who increasingly vocalized that the cabin had never been meant for me, hinting at my father's long-standing plans to sell. As support grew from my mother's side, my stepmother's antagonism intensified, and my father withdrew further, avoiding my attempts to communicate and leaving all interactions to be handled by my stepmother. This avoidance created an even more profound sense of isolation, making it painfully clear that he was aligning with her perspective over mine. While rummaging through old items to support our fundraising efforts, I unearthed a journal of my mother's. The pages revealed her aspirations for the cabin, envisioning it as a perpetual retreat for her children. She detailed plans for planting trees, making incremental enhancements, and hosting family reunions. Discovering her words reignited my resolve, reminding me of the deep personal significance the cabin held. However, the relentless strain of the campaign, coupled with familial discord and ongoing uncertainty, began to erode my well-being. To manage the emotional overload, I temporarily withdrew from Reddit, seeking solitude to regain my composure and perspective. When I re-engaged with the online community, the wave of encouragement and solidarity from supporters bolstered my spirits. They urged me not to surrender, empathizing through their own tales of familial challenges and tenacity. This collective support helped us achieve a significant fundraising goal, edging us nearer to the lofty asking price. With each contribution from friends and the success of various fundraising activities, the target gradually seemed attainable. Energized by this progress, I plan to continue our efforts and aim to present a compelling offer to the buyer soon. During this phase of renewed determination, I updated the buyer on our fundraising success, hoping they might reconsider their stance on the price. After some negotiation, they conceded to a minor reduction, a modest but encouraging victory. Yet, the path ahead remained daunting, and the clock continued to tick. My father's reaction to my updates, however, turned noticeably sour. He adopted a cynical tone, cautioning me about the financial responsibilities and burdens associated with the cabin. His words carried an undertone of bitterness, as if he wished to school me on the costs of clinging to the past. This shift in his demeanor puzzled me, especially since he had previously championed the idea of keeping the cabin within the family. Needing clarity, I confronted him to unearth the true reasons behind the sale and the full extent of his financial troubles. Initially evasive, he ultimately confessed to facing substantial debts, far more severe than he had previously admitted. The realization dawned that the cabin sale wasn't merely an attempt to start anew with my stepmom, but a desperate move to conceal a financial turmoil that my dad had been embroiled in for years. Understanding his motives, his rush to sell, his evasion about the cabin, and his overall dismissiveness shed light on the depth of his desperation, placing me unwittingly at the center of his financial crisis. This revelation, while clarifying, didn't dampen my resolve, but rather deepened my understanding of the complex layers of this ordeal. Some users on Reddit proposed exploring legal avenues to contest the sale, but after consulting with a lawyer, it became apparent that such an action was fraught with risks and unlikely to succeed, given the legality of the sale and the buyer's detachment from my dad's predicament. As the reality of my limited options set in, either continue fundraising or relinquish my claim, the news of my dad's debts began to circulate within our family. This prompted some relatives from his side to suggest that he should financially contribute to the cabin's repurchase, further straining our already tense relationship. My stepmom's antagonism escalated, threatening to sever ties if I persisted, accusing me of harassing them and tarnishing the family's reputation. Despite the mounting pressures, the prospect of securing the cabin kept me committed to finding a way, even if it meant considering a substantial loan to cover the financial gap. The emotional toll became nearly unbearable following another heated exchange with my dad, pushing me to contemplate whether reclaiming the cabin was worth the ongoing familial strife. Doubts crept in, tempting me to abandon the effort. However, the steadfast encouragement from my mom's side of the family reassured me, reinforcing the validity of my cause. In the midst of this emotional roller coaster, another consultation with the lawyer solidified the bleak legal outlook. Pursuing a lawsuit seemed futile as the sale was legally ironclad and the buyer held no fault. The paths forward were narrowing, yet the support from those who believed in the importance of preserving my mother's legacy provided the strength needed to press on. Every potential loophole I'd hoped to exploit proved non-existent, closing off yet another avenue. However, this setback only fueled my resolve to intensify fundraising efforts. A group of friends from my hometown rallied together to orchestrate a community fundraiser complete with a BBQ and live music, which drew a significant crowd from the area. The collective contributions, even the smallest ones, gradually accumulated, reinvigorating my commitment and reminding me that this endeavor extended beyond just my personal desire. It had galvanized a community. The local support was heartwarming, but the campaign also began to capture wider attention. My Reddit posts started to circulate beyond the initial subreddit, picking up traction across various social platforms, resulting in an influx of donations. The messages of solidarity from strangers, many of whom shared their own tales of familial contention, underscored the universal resonance of my struggle, propelling me onward with renewed vigor. In a final push, I approached the buyer to renegotiate the terms, laying bare the depth of my connection to the cabin and detailing the community's overwhelming support. I awaited their response. After a tense pause, they consented to lower their asking price once more, but insisted on a rapid transaction. This concession brought the cabin within grasp, setting the stage for a frantic race to secure the necessary funds. As I prepared to finalize the offer, I was acutely aware of the stake. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was the culmination of months of emotional investment, conflict, and community effort. The impending purchase was poised to mend one breach at the cost of widening another. My relationship with my father and his wife had deteriorated beyond simple disagreements, and my stepmother's antagonism was unequivocal. Reclaiming the cabin meant potentially severing familial ties with that side of my family. Yet reflecting on the journey, the cabin's significance as a sanctuary of my mother's memory and as a symbol of resilience reaffirmed my decision. It was more than a structure. It was a testament to shared history and love. Now, as I neared the final hurdle to bring the cabin back into the fold, I braced for the inevitable personal repercussions. The next update would reveal the outcome of this endeavor. Update 4. After enduring months of setbacks and emotional challenges, I succeeded in purchasing the cabin. The victory was profound, yet marred by the lasting strains it had introduced into my family dynamic. Finally, the cabin was mine once more, but the victory came at the cost of family ties. My father and stepmother ceased all communication, deepening the familial divide. Some relatives aligned with me, while others sided with my dad, creating a palpable tension. Despite the fractured relationships, I chose to concentrate on the positive outcome. The cabin was back under my stewardship. Upon revisiting the cabin for the first time since its sale, I was confronted with its dilapidated state. Neglect had taken its toll, the roof leaked, wood rotted in patches, and the interior was choked with dust and cobwebs. I couldn't help but wonder if its disrepair had been purposeful. The restoration would require significant resources, both in time and money. Support came swiftly from my mother's side of the family, who saw the renovation as a tribute to her memory. They arrived with supplies and a readiness to help, embodying the communal spirit she had cherished. It was profoundly moving to witness everyone uniting to revive the space that held so much of our collective memory. The local community, too, rallied around the effort, their participation transforming the cabin from a personal asset into a communal legacy linked to my mother's memory. Online, the narrative of my struggle and eventual success resonated widely. My Reddit update went viral, drawing support and shared experiences of familial discord and perseverance from a global audience. Donations trickled in, aiding the renovation efforts unexpectedly. However, not all feedback was supportive. Divisions remained sharp among my father's relatives. Some commended my dedication, while others parroted my stepmother's criticisms, accusing me of fracturing the family further. My stepmother herself confronted me, arguing that my father had been cornered into selling and criticizing my inability to see past my own desires. She maintained that my actions had alienated my father and polarized our family, putting me at the center of ongoing contention. Engaging with my stepmother further was fruitless. We were simply too far apart in our perspectives. Instead, I focused on the cabin's restoration, which unexpectedly became a form of therapy for me. Repairing the cabin, fixing the roof, painting the walls, cleaning years of neglect felt like mending parts of myself as well. Friends often joined the efforts, bringing supplies, assisting with repairs, and even organizing potluck dinners, turning the hard work into a communal activity that underscored I wasn't in this alone. However, the financial burden was becoming increasingly evident. The cabin required more extensive repairs than initially thought, and the costs quickly accumulated. Every time I thought I had enough saved for the next big repair, another issue would surface. Despite the financial strain, slowing down was not an option. The cabin had become a symbol of my perseverance and the battles I had faced. During one cleaning spree, I uncovered an old box filled with my mother's letters, photos, and keepsakes from past family vacations. Handling these artifacts reconnected me with her spirit and solidified my resolve, reminding me of the deep reasons behind my struggle. It reinforced my belief that, regardless of the fallout with my father and stepmom, reclaiming the cabin was the right decision. The renovation saga resonated with many online, leading to continued donations and moral support from people sharing similar familial challenges. The story even caught the attention of local media, adding a layer of public interest I hadn't anticipated, but that spurred me to keep going. Unexpectedly, my father reached out amidst the publicized renovations. He didn't offer an apology or seek reconciliation, but acknowledged his hasty decisions and the greater financial troubles than he had previously admitted. There was a tone of regret in his voice, yet it was clear he wasn't ready to fully mend our relationship. It was a complex exchange, one that offered some form of closure, but without the complete resolution I had hoped for. Accepting this, I realized that it wasn't my responsibility to change his viewpoint or absolve his mistake. Having reclaimed the cabin, I reached a point of acceptance. My stepmom expressed a desire to sever ties, and frankly, I was at peace with that decision. The realization dawned on me that some familial bonds might remain fractured indefinitely. After extensive renovations, the cabin finally stood restored. Not perfect, but it felt like home once more. We held a small celebration attended by friends, family, and some community members. That gathering marked the first time in a long while that I truly felt at peace. We shared laughs, recounted stories of my mom, and raised a toast in her memory. Although tinged with a hint of sadness, the moment felt profoundly right. The cabin would now serve as a personal retreat, a sanctuary for building new memories and reconnecting. This entire endeavor has taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, the complexities of family dynamics, and the unyielding support of a community. Regardless of the future with my dad and stepmom, I am confident that pursuing the cabin was the correct path for honoring my mom's legacy. I'll continue to update if circumstances change, but for now, the cabin is exactly where it needs to be. The finished cabin, with its new paint, reinforced structures, and thoughtful touches, was a testament to the efforts invested in its revival. Each completed task, each repaired nook, resonated with a sense of accomplishment and closure, reaffirming the cabin as a tribute to my mother's memory. I've decided the cabin will remain a retreat, an oasis from the hustle of daily life, and a symbol of my independence and perseverance. It represents a place of personal sanctuary, irrespective of the turbulence in other areas of my life. As for my dad and stepmom, our interactions have dwindled to the occasional necessary communication, maintaining a baseline of civility but acknowledging a changed dynamic. There's an unspoken understanding that our relationship may never return to its former state. My stepmom chose to distance herself entirely, a decision I've come to accept. In relinquishing the struggle to mend every fractured relationship, I found a deeper sense of peace. The narrative of the cabin caught fire online, touching people beyond my immediate social networks. I received messages from strangers who relayed their own struggles with family disputes and their efforts to preserve cherished memories. It was oddly comforting to realize that my personal ordeal was part of a broader human experience. This connection to others who had weathered similar storms provided a sense of solidarity that was unexpected but welcome. The fame that came with the story was unusual, but ultimately reassuring. It confirmed that my experiences resonated with others. A few weeks after completing the cabin, we organized a simple celebration. Friends and family came together for a low-key barbecue, enjoying the outdoors and each other's company. The evening was filled with laughter, music, and a shared sense of belonging that had been absent for too long. It was a modest event, but it felt like the perfect conclusion to a tumultuous chapter. I felt certain that my mother would have appreciated the joy and unity of that night. Shortly after this gathering, my father made a tentative step towards reconciliation. Our conversation was short and lacked full closure. He expressed some regrets, but didn't fully apologize. His approach was to acknowledge the past without delving too deeply into the emotions it stirred. I decided not to push the issue. We had both found ways to move on, recognizing that some wounds might never completely heal. It was a subdued acknowledgement, but somehow it was sufficient. Now, with the cabin restored and the familial tensions easing, I felt prepared to embark on a new chapter. The entire ordeal had been profoundly educational, leaving me with invaluable insights about resilience, the importance of community, and the enduring influence of my mother's legacy. To everyone who has followed along, offered support, or shared their own stories, your involvement has profoundly impacted my life. This experience has underscored the incredible strength of community bonds, a lesson I will hold close forever. Here's to fresh starts, cherished memories, and the cabin that helped weave them together.